Hi, I'm Liz Cully, and welcome back to Cool, Cool, Cool. Each week, I give you a glimpse into what I think is cool and chat with a ton of people that are definitely cool. No topic is off bounds unless I guess it's not cool. Welcome to Cool, Cool, Cool. I was just going to say, you sound like just a dream.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, no, I've had, I'm a pro. I'm a pro. Well, what's what funny about the documentary? Like just for temp audio, I did all the voices in the film. Like I did all like every Southern guy that was reading those letters, like Lincoln didn't like women, and every voice, all the voiceovers, the reading Lincoln letters. I did it all myself temporarily with this mic, and then later I just assumed we were going to get actors or whatever. And Rob, the producer's like, no, 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 you're great. I'm like, come on, I can't do
Wait,
every voice. That's
does that mean
preposterous.
that your talent too? Like, are you listed? You must.
No, I didn't even get because I'm in the credits so much. It just became absurd because it's a small film and it's an independent film. We did it all independently. We distributed it independently. We didn't have a distributor. We made direct deals with all the theaters and everything. So yeah, so I did the graphics and I filmed. I filmed so much of the footage that I didn't even give myself a camera person credit because it became too much. Like I'm one of the editors and one of the producers and director and writer, and it just became so. I don't know. I just didn't. I give
actually
myself
think
credit for a lot.
would have been amazing had you been like voice number 3,
Yeah.
voice number 4, Abraham Lincoln as a child
Yeah.
or whatever, and just like it kept rolling. Third
Yeah.
camera AD,
Yeah,
Shaun.
right.
It's like Shaun
I
Peterson,
know.
like it never ends. I
Yeah.
mean, I have so many questions. Were you a crazy history nerd growing up?
Well, it's funny. Yeah, I grew up in Wentzville, Missouri. That's where I went to high school. I mean, I moved all over the Midwest, but I went to high school in Wentzville, Missouri, a small town in Missouri, and I was a hardcore young Republican. When in eighth grade, I would carry around like a Bush sign everywhere. Like, let me see,
Stop it.
I would carry around a Bush sign, and I convinced 3 of my lunch ladies to register to vote who had never voted before.
Really?
And yes, and vote for Bush. Like here, I don't know if you can see in this picture.
Let me see. Oh
That's
my God,
me holding my
yes.
Bush sign in eighth grade, being like, vote for Bush. And I was like this crazy Republican. And when I was, in high school, I was a big Republican. And so I got, have you ever seen that picture of Bill Clinton shaking John F. Kennedy's hand when he was in high school? It's like a famous
Yes.
picture. So that's a program called Boy State. And now there's Boys Nation. And there's these 2 documentaries right now, I think on Netflix called Boy State and Girl State. It's this program where kids, leaders from high schools go and you get to meet the actual leaders in your state and you get to put on like that you're have a senate and you learn about government through role play. And then 2 kids from her state are chose to go to Boys Nation. And I got to go to Boys Nation and I got to meet George Bush Sr. when he was president. And I got to meet Bob Dole. So I have all these pictures with like me and
Bob
Bob Dole.
Dole.
Yeah. And so all these like Republicans, I was just like in hog heaven. And one of the highlights for me was going to see the Lincoln Memorial because that was the grandfather of the Republican Party. So I was like worshiping at the altar of Abraham Lincoln as a kid. I was obsessed with Lincoln. Growing up in Missouri, right next to Illinois, Lincoln was God. And like, how can you argue against the Republican Party when the Godfather had freed the slaves? That was kind of like the talking point that still exists today. Now, I ended up going to UC Santa Cruz. I became a total liberal hippie, and now my politics are much different. But like my base, my obsession with Lincoln started very young. And then when I was in 2006, this person, Clarence Tripp, C.A. Tripp, who was a researcher for Alfred Kinsey,
Yeah.
the famous sex researcher, they worked together. And Tripp wrote this book called The Intimate World of Abraham Lincoln. And the whole point of the book was that he was through the lens of a queer man, through the lens of a sex researcher. I'm going to re-examine all of this stuff in Lincoln history, letters, accounts from other people, the way people describe Lincoln in letters, like his speeches. Let's look at it through a queer lens. Let's look at it through a sex researcher lens and reconsider these pieces of history. And wow, what do I see here? It's like everyone, tons of scholars have read about Lincoln and Billy Green, the man he shared a cot with for 18 months when he was in his 20s. And a lot of people have read how, beyond how tall Lincoln was, the only other thing Billy used to describe Lincoln was how perfect his thighs were.
Well,
And so,
that was the one that really in the
yeah,
film, I was like, this is wild. I mean, also,
yeah,
I think even if you weren't queer and you weren't looking at through the queer lens, who's sharing a cot? Listen, people were poor. I get it.
yeah.
People needed to
And
share resources, but Lincoln wasn't necessarily always in a position where which you discuss in the film, where he needed to share resources on that level. And he was
yeah,
also a huge man. And if it was a bed versus a cot, you could probably argue that they could have gotten another cot.
yep.
And like, I mean, I'm married and my wife, when she gets hot, I'm like, can you please roll to the other side of
Hmm.
the bed? Like, and all of those things you don't see in George Washington's letters in history. He shared such close quarters with men in that way. Do you know what
Well,
I
I
mean?
mean,
I mean,
there are cases of like, apparently Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin would share a bed if they were going out on the road, or you were in an inn, or you were traveling. But if you're making it your home, and
right.
that's different. I mean, the thing about, especially on the prairie. So let's kind of go through it. So there are, in the film Lover of Men: The Untold History of Abraham Lincoln, we in the film make the case that Lincoln had some sort of what we would now call queer relationship with four different men. And that would be one when he was in his 20s, when he first moved away from his father,
Right.
and went out on his own in New Salem, Illinois. He was before Lincoln was Lincoln. He was out on the prairie. And the first one was Billy Green, who he shared a cot with for 18 months in the back of a store they both worked at. Then he became a legislator, and he was doing so well that he's like, I'm going to move to Springfield, the capital city, and I'm going to make a go of it there. And so he moves to Springfield. And when he moves there, he's offered multiple. We have a piece of evidence of at least one place to move in with his mentor. But instead, he moves in with a complete stranger, Joshua Speed, above his store that Speed runs, and shares a bed with Speed. And, if you see a picture of Speed, I mean, he's the hottest twink you've ever seen
I
in your
mean, well,
life.
I
I mean,
was
he's
just going to say he's so
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, that's a really
I mean, yeah, here's the letter that we have in the film, where it's from William Butler, his mentor. And William Butler just paid off a bunch of Lincoln's debts. His wife was mending all of his clothes. He was hooking him up financially. And then in this letter, he says, "Come make my home your home." He's inviting Lincoln to move in with him and his family and have his own room. But instead, he turns this down to move in with a complete stranger who just happens to be so hot and share a bed with this person. And no, okay, let's give the conservative historians their due. Lincoln was poor. He needed to share a bed for a minute to get on his feet. But they went on to share that bed for 4 years. And in that 4 years, Lincoln became a very successful lawyer, and
yeah.
he was a legislator. So, in today's money, he was making at least $200,000 a year. He could have afforded his own house. So, whenever these historians use this tired line, well, men shared beds, not 4 years. And then you add to that, it's all in the context. You add to that the letters that Lincoln wrote to Speed once he moved away, these like beautiful, heartbreaking love letters that he never wrote like that to anyone else. Any historian that knows Lincoln will look through all of his letters through time. He's a lawyer and he's a politician. He writes really dry. He writes very straightforward. He might put a joke in there, but he's not writing these forlorn letters where he's talking about how jealous he is of Speed's new wife, about how lonely he is, how he wants to die, that he moved away. It's really, really different. Because I was on an NPR show yesterday, and we on the show was Michael Burlingame, and he is considered probably the most well-known living Lincoln scholar. But Burlingame is very conservative, very misogynistic, and frankly, takes a very homophobic approach to Lincolnography. He is terrified of this becoming a thing, that Lincoln was queer. So he was on there, on the show. Burlingame, who's in his 70s, called himself he referred to himself as no, I got to give you the phrase, because it's so outrageous that you know, and I don't want to make fun of him, but it just kind of shows you how like out of step he is. Oh, he called himself a compulsive heterosexual. A compulsive heterosexual. That's how he referred to himself. And we were trying to say, listen,
What does that even mean?
it sounds like something JD Vance would say, right? It's like
I don't even think JD Vance is smart enough to know what
right,
compulsive, like, I don't even.
it's creepy. It sounds creepy.
It sounds so gay. You know
Yeah,
what
right.
It's like,
It's so insecure and so defensive.
insecure. Well, and that's what I was going to say is, obviously he's quite insecure because he's so staunch in wanting to protect this idealistic, misogynistic, heterosexual version of Abraham Lincoln. What is the big deal with Abraham Lincoln potentially not being 100% heterosexual to these people? Why is your documentary, and you say it in the documentary, the people that should really be watching, or I read it, obviously I've consumed a lot of content about you. So what is, the people that should really be watching this documentary, especially right now before the election, which is great that it's going to be available on all platforms very soon. Don't worry, your wonderful PR made sure that I know all about that.
Thank you.
But what is the big fucking deal? Like, what is it going to do? What is the problem? It doesn't take away that he freed the slaves. It doesn't take away what he's done. What is the big deal if he was, in fact, queer on any Kinsey level? What is the big deal?
Well, that's a great question, Liz. And this is what your entire podcast is about, right? I mean, this is the $1 million question is that people are homophobic, right?
Yeah.
Like it's when you get into the sports, when you get into and homophobic also in a way that is, it's the same thing, we talk about in politics overall, in gender politics and in sex politics. It's even when it's like the Midwest dad who's okay with the tomboy daughter, right? But the effeminate son is bad news. Right. And so all of it comes down to not only homophobia, but misogyny. If anyone is considered womanly or effeminate, whether they are a woman, identify as a woman, or they're a gay man that's effeminate, it is just laser focused on that being bad and othered. And this idea that Lincoln may have been sexually intimate with other men, who is and I'll tell you, John Stauffer from Harvard University, he was a former chairman of the American Studies Department at Harvard University that's in the film. He has this great phrase that he talks about where a Lincoln scholar said to him, he basically said to him, hold on, let me get the exact phrasing of it. He said, this conservative guy said, if I lose my faith in Lincoln, I lose my faith in the United States. And what that means is, if I have to think of Lincoln as this queer guy, my entire view of the United States is crumbled. Basically, what he's saying is America is white and heterosexual and heteronormative, and anything outside of that just crumbles what we are as a nation. And it just really speaks to how truly conservative we still are. I mean, what's amazing is that when we were debating Michael Burlingame, he was going to great lengths to try to find a letter where it showed that at a party, Lincoln was flirting with another woman, or he may have flirting. But I said, we're not arguing he's exclusively gay. The biggest point of the film, and Liz, you've seen it, and I think this is what makes it fascinating. A lot of queer people that see the film will say this to me, that this is fascinating, that the word gay, the word homosexual, the word heterosexual, those terms and ideas did not exist in Lincoln's time.
That's actually what was so interesting. And I agree. Yeah. That's something I really globbed onto when watching it. I was like, yeah, those reports from Kinsey hadn't even really been in the zeitgeist. No one was talking about the levels of heterosexuality versus homosexuality. No one was talking about that. People were just who they were. I mean, a lot of that even translates into drag culture, or even folks that are transgender or transitioning. Like, none of those, we didn't have that language, so we couldn't create a divide, right? Right. Abraham Lincoln, you have the letters. It was very documented from people that observed him. He wasn't really that interested in women. He wasn't chasing girls. He wasn't that focused on it, which is fine. I have been married to men. I've been into men. People ask me, well, are you a lesbian? Are you this or that? I'm like, I'm just queer. I'm married to a woman. Tom Hardy is very fucking hot. If Tom Hardy was like, let's have sex, I'd be like, hey, Rachel, is it chill if I fuck Tom Hardy real quick? You know what I mean? It's like,
Yes.
whatever. And I think that what was so interesting to me is like language and how language can be so freeing, but it can also be so damning and it can also be so divisive. So maybe things changed. Maybe you know, I don't know. That's what I also really loved in the documentary is that it wasn't like he's gay. I mean, obviously that's a part of the discussion, but it's like, so what? He was in love with a man. He might have been in love with Mary. I mean, I don't know. I mean, God bless her. I don't know if he really, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, what is love or maybe romantic love? But yeah, I mean, he probably was just living his life just like anybody else. And that was who he was into. And that is who he wanted to live upstairs of a, you know, on top of the store with, you know?
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is like, look, this documentary, you know, has gotten a lot of headlines. Was Lincoln gay? And that's a great catchy headline and people will grab onto it. But what we hope is that people watch the film and learn that literally the word homosexual was invented in the 1870s. There was no term for it before then. And heterosexuality was invented in the 1870s. It was made up then. So all of a sudden you have these two categories and you're one or the other, pick a team. And then they said, oh, well, maybe we should have this bisexuality thing in there. But really, those people are mainly gay, but you know, they have societal pressures. So we have these categories and we have these systems. And then Freud grabbed them, right? And then it made it there's a medical discourse that started coming around these terms. And so you started to categorize people. Which box are you in? And then the church was like, oh, I like this because now the scientific community is making this a pathology. That heterosexuality, because that's how you make kids, that's how you make children, that's the normal thing. And the abnormal thing, the kind of thing that's actually a pathology, that's a sickness, is homosexuality. And the church is like, ooh, like this. Because for all of Christianity, sodomy, same-sex sodomy was a sin, but so is cheating on your wife, and so is having sex with a horse. Like anything that's not making new Catholics, anything that's not making new babies is a sin. Same level of sin. There wasn't a hierarchy in it. But suddenly, when you get into the 20th century, you know, homosexuality becomes the ultimate sin. It really gets demonized. And that's why from basically 1870 into like 1910, that's when the term starts getting more popularized. And you don't really see the backlash until after the Roaring 20s. I mean, Roaring 20s were a gas. I mean, they were a blast. There was a lot of same-sex intimacy, all these like what we would now call drag clubs and you know, same-sex and gay clubs. And then the 30s, you know, when the economic crackdown comes in, anytime there's like an economic crackdown, they start othering people. And then really when we get into the 50s, that's where you really see the lavender scare, where they start kicking people that they think might be gay or lesbian out of the government jobs. And then, of course, we get to Stonewall. And a lot of people think like, you know, gay history starts at Stonewall. But in the film, we really go all the way back to the Greeks and the Romans. Like people, before there was a name homosexual, before there was a name heterosexual, people were just fluid. And it was a very homosocial world. Like men hung out with men exclusively until they got married. Like a man wasn't friends with a woman. That just wasn't like that back then. Women were friends with women. So up until you get married, how are you like getting your sexual needs met? Well, some men will go to a prostitute, you know, they might go to a woman, but a lot of them got each other off. I mean, and you see this in today's world, like in prisons, men consensually have sex with each other because there are no women available. You know, men on ships, like during World War II, the Navy was going hog wild. And it was because you were getting your sexual needs met. And even in World War II, there wasn't as much of a stigma around it. But, you know, I grew up in Missouri. I was in the locker room. You know, you see like a guy and after the game you hug and you're like, oh, this feels kind of nice. And then you say to yourself, oh, no, I'm not gay. That's going to make me gay. And then all of a sudden you have this word, this term, this binary that's stuck in your head that means it's bad. And you get in your head about it. But in 1840, Lincoln had nothing to get in his head about it. He hugged someone, it felt good, and he went with it. And it was very common. So we're not trying to say Lincoln was an outlier. This was super common for men, that they would just act on their sexual impulses, and it wasn't a big deal. And it's fascinating that these scholars will say to us, well, like if anyone had heard about that, the press would have gone wild with it. They wouldn't have, because the press wouldn't have anything, because they wouldn't have thought it was a big deal. There's no scandal there because that kind of intimacy was normal. So there's nothing to like to get all upset about, because we live in a very different world in the 19th century. If JFK had sex with a man, yes, that would be a scandal in the 60s. But in 1840, it was a completely different world. And that's what we really get into. Like, Lincoln being gay is a Trojan horse to talk about sexual fluidity throughout history. And what I really like is getting into the contemporary world and Gen Z, or Gen Z, or even someone like yourself, Liz, you're like, I love who I love. And that is humanness. That is what humans should be before these terms started screwing it up. These terms, this idea of binaries is such a short-lived time. Like, it was invented during our great-grandparents' time. It's such a blip in the map. Before this, it was way more fluid. And hopefully after this, it will be much more fluid once Gen Z kind of like takes the reins.
I want to talk a little bit about queer erasure and the duty of us in entertainment and media have to unearth it, and why it's happening so much more now than ever. You know, one of the most beloved shows of the last year during Emmy cycles was Fellow Travelers, which I loved. I don't know if you saw it, but it was great.
I did not. My last year was,
yeah. Well, you were done making a movie.
I know.
You were making a movie. I'm going to give you a pass. Don't worry. But what was great about that is it really showed, you know, the stories of during the Lavender Scare, during McCarthyism, during, you know, folks in government. Literally, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's folks in government who were queer and had to hide. And, you know, why it was so important that that show was made, why it's so important that you've made the documentary that you've made. And I think there's a lot more content that's coming out where we're unearthing the real stories that were actually happening. Do you think that it is on us to work with journalists and showcase these on a larger level now more than ever?
I do. I really do. And, you know, I don't know if you saw, but, you know, Variety a couple of weeks ago, there was an article about how the streamers right now are just too hot to handle. Like, I edited a documentary with Rory Kennedy, who is, you know, Robert Kennedy's daughter, and on the 737 Supermax crashes, called Downfall, for Netflix. And so it was a great experience working with Rory, brilliant filmmaker. But her new film on immigration that did really well at the festivals, I mean, this is a brilliant filmmaker, is not picked up. Too hot to handle, right?
Yeah.
All these films that are too political are not being picked up by the streamers. It's a very safe zone right now. So yes, I think these queer stories need to be told. But, you know, we're at a point where, like, we're not on Netflix. We self-distributed our movie. This is a film that people are responding to. I know we had...
Well, Alex Hedison, who is a friend who I just had on the show, who just did a short documentary about Alok, who obviously
Alok's amazing.
Is brilliant. Also in your documentary as well. Yep. They're on the festival circuit and they're doing quite well, but it's the same thing. They were at Sundance.
That film was at Sundance.
I know. And that's what I think is so interesting. And that's why I ask, is it us that has to create those stories? Because coming from my background of working at, you know, I went to J school. I started, you know, San Francisco Chronicle. I've worked in media for a long time.
Amazing.
I don't know. Is it? I mean, it was.
Look, I went to UC Santa Cruz, right? So, like, when we got a San Francisco Chronicle positive review and a little guy that's like clapping out of the chair.
I know,
like my entire college years when I was reading the papers, the Chronicle, to see the reviews and the clapping guy. And someday that I would get the little clapper.
I know, it's true.
I was so excited.
It's true. Listen, when I was in SF Weekly, when I had a band so many years ago, I still have it. My wife's like, why do you have all these newspapers? I'm like, because I have to keep them. You know, journalism right now, no one trusts it, right? And that's why I'm asking about really the medium of film and television, because that does still somehow get into the people's homes, whether or not they continue to watch it or they watch the first episode or they watch the whole documentary or whatever. But that's like the best chance I think that we have in actually telling true stories. For some crazy reason, AKA Trump and good old Murdoch, no one believes the press anymore, and nobody believes what anybody's talking. And it's this like bullshit where we're all, you know, these Instagram, you know, user number 42F5K is like somehow now has the ability to fact check fucking MSNBC. I mean, I just don't know where these stories are going to continue to live on a larger scale. And so I wonder, is it up to us to continue to have these conversations? Because it's really hard for people to get information. It's really hard for people to trust information. I was on a call yesterday with someone and they're like asking, about some topic. And I said, actually, I covered that on my show a year ago. I'm like, do you not listen to my show? Like, that's why I try to have these conversations with folks and give people a platform, because it's very important that Abraham Lincoln this history hasn't been rewritten, that he and Mary Booth were like, the happiest couple that ever lived, and that he wasn't a multi-dimensional person that could also do good things. Yeah. And bad things and whatever thing, and it's just like what
you're talking about is important, because it's like, at the end of the day, it's the container in which you're getting this information. And,
totally.
When you see in 2016, Trump start to dismantle the trust of the New York Times.
I know.
The most sacred journalistic institution, arguably in the world. And suddenly you have half the nation doubting the New York Times. It almost gutted the institution. Like, they had to do a lot of firings.
Hold on. And the New York Post, like, fucking skyrocketed in the same moment. And that is what I mean. It's like, all of a sudden.
So where do you get information, right? And then, well, in our generation, I'm not going to ask you your age.
We're the same. I have a great Olga thing. I would just like to give a little shout out.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you
Olga,
26? Like, do I have to have like a...
Do you want to have sex? Do you want to have thigh sex? Should we have thigh sex right now? Because I could be in Topanga in like 25 minutes.
That's how Lincoln got Billy. He complimented how young Billy looked. Yeah, that's how it works.
Like, want to have sex? No, it's like fucking Olga. My injector really makes me look young.
Oh, but, Olga. I got to meet Olga.
Yeah, she's the best.
But I mean, that to me, that's the thing. It's like when we grew up, suddenly Gen Xers were like, where do you get your news from? The Comedy Central. What? Oh yeah, there's a show, The Daily Show. And everyone started losing their minds that suddenly Dan Rather wasn't the news source. It was a comedian. But then the comedians, whether, Colbert and all those people, really did heavy research. I mean, their research and writing teams were wonderful. I mean, their stuff was on point. And so it changed the framework of how you got your information. And now when my niece, who's like 19, gets all of her info from TikTok, and my old Gen X brain is like, really? But there are a lot of TikTokers who really do their research, that really, not all of them.
I know, but what's crazy though? And I had this conversation actually with some clients yesterday.
Yeah.
The misinformation and also the bad information. Like, did you hear about the whole check fraud TikTok? Where all these kids were going on TikTok and basically teaching people how to do check fraud. But they're like, it's not fraud. Because it's like, if you have a bank account, it's all good. And all these kids were getting into $50,000 worth of debt.
Oh my God.
But here's the thing is like,
yeah, but Fox News is also misinformation, right?
Trust me.
There's a huge, like, storied institution that's saying the election was stolen, and it's almost like, how is Fox News any worse than a TikToker?
No, and that is my whole point. Is like, there is now no fucking difference, and so if we are in a situation where people can't differentiate between what is real and what is not real, and what is right and what is wrong, and what happened and what didn't happen, and we doctored a picture. And I mean, here am I sitting here with a face full of fucking silicone in my lips. Like, what?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were an AI avatar or if I was really talking to you, Liz.
Oh my God, thank you. My hair looks dirty enough that you can definitely tell that I'm a real person. But in all seriousness, it's like, well, these stories actually really need to be told. I had a similar situation during BLM where my front step was literally ground zero for a 7.5 hour stakeoff between LAPD and protesters. And I ended up being on the cover of the New York Times because somebody took a picture of me and I, saw what we were doing. And I ended up doing like this crazy press circuit. I was on Ryan Seacrest, which let me tell you, didn't have that on my bingo card to talk about the protest, but the misinformation about what happened that day. And I'm getting on, what is it, like Stars, like Ryan Seacrest, like Sirius XM network. And he's like, yeah, but wasn't it scary? Kind of trying to lead the witness. And I was like, whoa, Mr. Seacrest, you might be tired because that's not what happened that day. And that is where I'm, sort of wondering how we can make sure that queer history erasure doesn't continue the way that it is, which is why, I'm so thrilled to be talking to you, and you should be so proud of the work that you've done and all the historians that you had. And, it's like we have to keep making these stories, and we have to keep fact checking even the people that are supposedly reporting the truth, because like the guy that you were on NPR with yesterday, that guy really fucking believes what he's saying.
He is, and he's scared because I think he knows the power of this kind of media. It's like he knows that this could change everything.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that part of the problem lies for these people is that, and he also, like, you're not going to speak to a younger generation if you're saying things like I'm compulsively heterosexual. I mean, anybody that's,
but hold on.
a Gen Zer is like, wait,
but
what?
There is this like weird, fucked up young, it always happens. There's this young contingency of folks that are really conservative.
Yeah, you're right.
And, and so maybe he is speaking to them, which
I'm always filled with hope. I always like say, okay, Gen Z, save us. But you're right. All these statistics show that while women are feeling empowered and they're feeling like we don't really need you guys, and we're actually being higher income earners now, we're getting higher degrees, there will be an entire generation of incel men who are not needed for anything, who continue to be misogynistic jerks and not, earn a woman. Like for most all of history, a man could get a woman just based on the fact that that's the way the world was, and she would have to put up with his BS. And now it's a world where women are like, what? And women are not having children by choice because they want to have a full life. And these childless cat women who are living happy lives, and they don't need men. And that younger generation is getting scared, I think, a little bit. And that's what's scary with AI and sex robots. And, we're getting into a whole thing here, but.
Well, I know. But it's interesting though. And truly, I mean, a good friend of mine and former Real Housewife of New York, Bravo, said years ago, men are the new women. And I loved it because she had all this merch, men are the new women. And no one understood it and no one could get it. And I'm like, yeah, because men are now being treated like women were, and they can't fucking handle it. And, the incel hatred, it's interesting. I recently did an episode of this show with a wonderful woman, and we talked about, very jokingly, hating playdates. I basically was like, I'm scared to have a kid. Tell me, is it really all it's cracked up? Tell me about it. And she's like, yeah, fucking playdates suck. Kids are brats. And the comments, this is almost to 1 million views, thousands and thousands of comments, and it's all men sickened by women who would ever not like their place in the home and hosting a play date.
Wow.
It's like, what, dude? Are you fucking kidding? And of course it's Jimmy with a shotgun with and that is where I think it's so detrimental that we keep talking about what really happens, and that people are multidimensional, and that Jimmy with the shotgun might actually like the color pink, and that's okay. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I think, I also sort of joke where I'm like, oh God, the only thing that used to be edgy about me, being a, middle-class white woman was that I was queer, because now everybody's fucking queer. But, I'm like, oh my God, and I used to have a nose ring, but my wife made me take it out after 23 years, which also it felt very homophobic, and I can't really explain why, but it's fine. It's our 5-year wedding anniversary today, so I'm going to continue to marry her and be with her. Commit.
If that's your one sore spot, you're doing pretty well.
I mean, also, she made me take out my belly button ring after so many years, even more longer than that. I know. It all just feels very homophobic. I can't explain why. It was me and Britney Spears holding on to the belly button ring.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes.
But I wonder, that's why I wanted to have the conversation really about, who is the onus on? I mean, we could really dive into it. I mean, look at the top buyers and also studio execs.
Yeah.
How many of them are queer?
Well, there's a ton of them. Well, there's a lot of queer folks in the media, and I've worked with a lot of them, but a lot of them are like, I don't know if I want to touch that, or like I don't want to appear that I have a gay agenda. So I'm just going to make normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill content. Like Killer Films is a great example of like that go out on the line, but they always kind of have served on the outside as an independent studio. And I think that really what we're seeing is that like when these big streamers are algorithmically based
Yeah.
and they're really trying to like find the middle point. I mean, now back in the day, it's like, okay, I get it. These big Hollywood movies that are in the theaters are 4-quadrant films. We're spending $140 million on this. It needs to appeal to lots of different people. But now when TV shows are under that same exact metric, where it has to be a little bit of something for everyone, post COVID, because it got very niche, the golden age of TV got very niche. And now they're pulling back on production. I mean, I'm sure everyone's talking about that in town right now, that like the production's pulled and it's cheaper to make a movie in England where the pound is like 40% higher. I'm not a mathematician, but like the British pound is the the most valuable piece of currency, and it's cheaper to make a film in England. And so that's what's really detrimental to, I think, to where we are, but also that's also going to take away, I think, a lot of the, kind of the voices that are in media. And for us, going back to your original question, like, do you believe newspapers? Do you believe news stories? Why is the container of telling the story in a film interesting or good? Because I think people still like movies. People love movies, and it's a movie. And I think also what helped is all of the true crime stuff that's out.
Yeah,
because at the end of the day,
it's true.
Our movie is sort of like a true crime movie structurally. It's like there's recreations in it, and we're presenting evidence to make a case. And we went and, you see documents come on screen. Like literally, I ended up doing most all of the document graphics myself. But when I was interviewing people, all the graphics companies, I was trying to find the people that had done true crime, because they do very interesting ways of presenting the police
I like
reports.
the words coming out. Yeah. Highlighting the words.
Police report, and now these graphics companies have a lot of experience doing police report graphics. And so I wanted to do the same thing with these letters. But to that point, we went to great lengths to send all these researchers into the Library of Congress and pull out these letters. A lot of these letters have never been seen in the public eye in the actual handwriting of these people. When you read a book like this, in our world, like you're saying, fake news, I don't believe it. This book has a lot of this stuff in it, not all of it, but some of it, but it's transcribed in a book.
Right.
And you read it, you're like, oh, he could have just made this up. This is fake. So for me, it was important to get the actual letter and the actual handwriting from the Library of Congress to try to bulletproof this as much as possible. Now, some people are still going to say it's fake, but I wanted to go as far as I could in getting scholars from Harvard, Columbia, Brown, these big Ivy League institutions. So it didn't seem like a conspiracy theory film. And I wanted to really try to protect the truth by having this a collection of big name scholars. One of the main people in the film, I think I mentioned Dr. John Stauffer. He's one of the greatest academic minds of his generation. He's the chairman of the American Studies Department at Harvard University, and he wholeheartedly, agrees with this theory. And it was very important for him to be in the film. And so, and he, he's a straight man. He's not a gay scholar with a gay agenda. He's just like, yeah, I looked at the evidence and I'm a historian, and it's pretty clear what was happening, because you have to think about the context of the 19th century. It was way more fluid back then, especially on the prairie. And so that for us, I think, helped tell this story with the visuals, with the level of scholars, and then also just it being in a film. And, look, if you read some of the reviews, it's like, oh, there's all these recreations in it. But as a filmmaker, you're also like, dude, there's like one photo of Joshua Speed. Like, how am I going to tell this 23-minute section on them? And what are you going to see on screen? You have to do the recreations. But also, I think it makes it more palatable and more watchable. I didn't go over the top with the recreations, I don't think, but I think it helps you like, oh, okay, I can really picture this now. I can picture this relationship. I can picture them cuddling in bed. I can picture the intimacy and the friendship. And I think that was also helpful in telling the story.
Did any of the families, like Speed family, like have you heard from any of them?
Well, I filmed like all that footage at Farmington is actually Farmington. That is the Speed plantation. I went down there and I filmed. And, to be honest with you, it's not like I was doing like a Borat thing where I'm like totally fibbing, but I did go down there and I said, I'm filming a documentary about Lincoln's friendship with Joshua Speed. And they're like, oh,
Yeah,
cool. And I didn't get to the details there, but yeah, they were happy and I filmed there and drone shot and all the whole bit. And they were really loved that the Speed name would get out into a public way. But I haven't heard from them. No. And I filmed at Lincoln's actual house in Springfield. I filmed at all those cabins and stuff are New Salem. They reassembled the entire New Salem village back
that's
in the
cool.
1940s with actual log cabins. I filmed all out there. And everyone was like, happy to do it. But in fact, several big name scholars and people from the Lincoln Library have all requested screeners of the film. They're very curious about it. But as you saw also in the film, when we get into Captain Derrickson,
Right.
which is his bodyguard that while he was president was sleeping in the same bed with,
Which is
this
like,
idea, right? This idea like, oh, he couldn't afford a bed or he was down on his luck. It's like he's the president of the United States and he's in a giant house that's still standing. You can go visit the president's cottage. It's now called Lincoln's Cottage. It's outside of Washington, D.C. And I filmed right in the same building. The woman Joan that is the historian there, she's very open about, it's very, she doesn't deny this is a government institution. She doesn't deny that it was very possible that they were intimate together. She's in the film. I interviewed her. And so, which is kind of cool because it's almost like,
yeah,
it's not like we're
I
fully
like
getting government sanctioned that this is possible, but the historian on site at Lincoln's Cottage is saying, there's something here. So, I would encourage people to see the film because it's like a crime movie. Like a lot of these true crime movies, the ones that are good at the end, you're kind of like, wait a second, did they actually do it? Like, or Menendez brothers, right? All this debate is going out right now, whether it's Kim Kardashian saying, free the brothers or whatever. There's a debate at the end of these movies that you kind of like, well, is it true or is it not? That's what makes these crime movies so good. And I'm hoping people kind of start a debate when they watch our movie too. It's like, well, this evidence is there. Now, is there a letter where Lincoln said, Joshua, I held you in my arms and kissed you all over? No, but there's so much evidence. Like, let me just read this little part that's really interesting.
Go for it.
So Lincoln and Speed, share a bed for 4 years. And then Speed's dad dies, who owns a giant plantation in Kentucky, right? Here's the thing. The guy that frees the slaves is in love with a guy who has one of the largest plantations in Kentucky, right? Can you imagine the dichotomy there? It's like whatever. It's like the Hatfield McCoys or something. And so he says, all right, it's in his own head. Speed says, okay, my dad dies. I got to go back and take over the plantation, help my mom. So he doesn't really tell Lincoln. So Lincoln in the paper reads that Speed is selling his store and moving back to Kentucky. And Lincoln goes into, which is highly documented, dozens and dozens of documentation of Lincoln falling into the greatest depression of his life. Now, historians, conservative historians will say, oh, well, it was because the legislative body wasn't doing well, or that him and Mary Todd, who were courting, weren't doing well. But it is so clear that the fatal first, which Lincoln refers to in his own handwriting, the fatal first, January 1st of 1841, that's when he reads in the paper, and we have it in the film, the actual paper with that date on it. Speed is moving or selling the store. Lincoln falls in this deep depression and he's suicidal. There's accounts of people having to take the razors out of his room. He stops going to the legislature. He loses all this weight. Everyone said he looks like a ghost. He's just so depressed. And Speed moves. And Speed is taking over plantation. It's a marriage culture back then. You have to get married. No matter who you're having sex with on the side, you have to have a wife if you're going to be running a plantation. So he quickly gets married down there. And Lincoln visits him down in Farmington. It's kind of like a bittersweet goodbye. He's there when he's courting his new wife, Fanny. And they have a bittersweet, moment down there. And Lincoln is able to witness all the slavery. And he's like, what is going on down here? This is brutal. Lincoln goes home and they start writing letters back and forth. And when Speed gets married, he's really bummed. And they're writing these really weird letters too. Like, so are you going to have sex? Like, what do you think that's going to be like? Like, I
It's
feel
crazy.
for you here. Yeah. It's like, they both are terrified with having sex with a woman. And it's in all these letters. And Lincoln's like, I can't really give you advice, man. Like, I've never been in your shoes, but I hope for the best. And like, tell me what happens. So Speed gets married, right? He gets married. And these are all dated letters, right? The morning after he's, can you imagine on your honeymoon? I don't know if this happened with you, Liz, or not, but on your honeymoon, the next morning, wife's still asleep in the bed. He scurries over and starts writing to Lincoln about how
Yeah,
like he
that didn't
consummated
happen to me. Yeah, no.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Though, unfortunately, on my honeymoon, I did see a lot of flaccid penises because I went to Big Sur and I was staying
Oh
in
my
the, and I
gosh.
was
Oh,
staying
you're
in
a hippie.
Yeah, I'm from San Francisco, born and
Yeah,
raised.
right. Of course.
So I went to Ventana and I was by the naked pool and all these guys had their
Oh,
dicks out. And then I
yes.
went to that stupid fucking place, whatever it's called, in Big Sur, where they're all naked in pools and all these guys had their dicks out. Anyway, that did happen.
Oh, you were finally like, I got rid of the guys out of my life. I married the woman of my life. And
Yeah.
then you had a bunch of
Floppy dicks.
Oh my God, what a nightmare.
It was a fucking actual nightmare. But anyway, okay, continue.
Oh, well, okay. But what Speed does is he wakes up the next morning, speaking of floppy dicks, and runs over to write Lincoln to tell him, hey, listen, I can't believe it, but like, I actually did the deed and, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And here's the thing though, we don't have Speed's letters to Lincoln. The only letters that exist are Lincoln's letters to Speed. So we're able to read what Lincoln is responding to, and he does a good job responding like point by point, tit for tat, what Speed's saying. So we gather from Lincoln's letter that he writes to him. He said everything went okay. Lincoln writes and he says, and then this is the letter that he just got from Speed saying everything went okay. He said, I opened the letter. This is from Lincoln's handwriting. I opened the letter with intense anxiety and trepidation, so much that although it turned out to be better than I expected, the sex with your wife turned out to be better than I expected. I have hardly yet, at the distance of 10 hours, become calm. So here's Lincoln. This is not a hyperbolic man in 21st century speech, like, oh, I was freaked out for 10 hours. We exaggerate. We are there's a lot of hyperbole in our speech. Back then, there wasn't. Lincoln was a straight shooter, honest Abe. He said he was completely distraught for 10 hours. This man was shaking around the house, terrified, so upset that this had happened, that he had actually had sex with his wife, like freaked out. And then shortly after that, a couple days later, he writes a letter saying, I feel somewhat jealous of both of you now, you and your new wife. You will be so exclusively concerned for one another that I shall be forgotten entirely. I shall be very lonesome without you. How miserable things seem to be arranged in this world. If we have no friends, we have no pleasure. And if we have them, we are sure to lose them and be doubly pained by the loss. And it's important to hear that word friend, right? Because friend in the 19th century, and there's a lot of scholarship on the word friend. When you say someone's your friend, it's different than today. Everyone has friends. I mean, friendship is so capitalized, the capitalism around friendship, it's like Facebook makes friendship just a digital, like blase thing. Oh, I'm friends with them and them. In the 19th century, a friend was a soulmate. A friend was a true love in your life. And men and women had deep friendships where that was intellectual and spiritual and soulful and most oftentimes physical. So when he's saying, I have no friends, if we have no friends, we have no pleasure. That's like saying, if we don't have a love like you, then we have no pleasure. And we're bound to lose the love of our lives because of the system that we have where we have to get married in 19th century. So it's a tragic love letter when you're reading it in context. And what's important in our film, and what I was trying to say to this, Lincoln scholar, like, listen, you know everything about the Civil War, you know everything about his speeches, but what we have in our film are experts in 19th century sexuality. People that can take this same letter that you've read and all the Lincoln scholars have read and put it in context of people that have been studying male friendship for their entire careers. And when you read it through that lens, you know what's going on here.
It makes me sad for him though.
Yeah.
I did take that away from it. I was like, damn, that he really loved. I mean, also so emotional, this guy. Yeah. Really. And
he never wrote like that. Like, let me just, he never wrote a letter like that to his wife. He never used the word jealous. That might be the only account of him writing the word jealous anywhere in the thousands and thousands of pieces of handwriting of Abraham Lincoln. Like, this man was a dry writer. He might tell a joke in something, but this emotional. And whenever a conservative scholar just kind of brushes this off, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating as a queer community to be like, come on, man. Like, it's so obvious. Jonathan Ned Katz, who's kind of the grandfather of queer history and queer studies. He's in his 80s now, and he's done so much research and so much scholarship on male friendships and bed sharing. It's just like it takes one to know one. It's
I mean,
just
yeah,
like,
fair enough. Yeah. It does,
it's kind
though.
of like it's
Sometimes
like
it's secret handshake that's not so secret.
right, or a wink or whatever, a little glance, or the male gaze. It's like people have the instinct of like, is that guy looking at me like friendly or is he a creep? You just have that gut instinct on certain things, or there's certain things in communities. It's all about subtext. And when you take that out, and you become like a biblical literalist, or whatever, it's just like you're not doing full scholarship. And that's what's so exciting about a younger generation of scholars who are reinterpreting not only Lincoln, but all kinds of things throughout history. That things are just so cut and dry. And like you were saying, like, what is fact? What is fiction? Elon Musk tweeted against the
I
film.
know, I did see that. But also,
Matt
Elon
Walsh.
Musk can go play in fucking traffic.
Right, exactly. Alex Jones, Ben Shapiro, all these right-wing maniacs are all after us, saying it's revisionist history. But everything is revisionist history when you find a new fact. It's like when a new dinosaur species is found, no one's like, wait a second, we have all the dinosaurs figured out. It's like, no, there's a new piece of evidence that was just found. And there's a whole new species that was part of the evolutionary period. And we have to rethink what this is. And this stuff is science. This is a science to this history.
You must get some satisfaction, though. When I saw the poll, like when I saw the tweets from Elon and Ben getting peeved with your film, you must get like a little satisfaction out of that.
Oh,
right?
Sure. I mean, the producer of the film, the main producer, Rob Rosenheg, he loves it. He loves that he loves poking the bear a little bit. And I do too. I do too. I'm trying to stay somewhat neutral in this so that I don't come across having an agenda, because I really don't have an agenda. I would never have made this film if I didn't think the evidence was there. It is fun for those people to be like, what? But what I really hope is that they watch it and like give it a chance. Like when I will tell you, Matt Walsh, one of the most well-known right-wing, thinkers, if you want to call him that, out there right now, has a new film out called Am I Racist? And it's he's breaking down wokeism. The second that's out, I'm going to watch that film. I'm going to watch that right-wing, what people will call a right-wing piece of propaganda. I'm curious about it. I went and saw the Reagan movie. I will have an open mind and see these things. And I would hope that Matt Walsh would do the same, have the same respect for me and watch the film, because he did a 20-minute segment on our trailer and broke down how it's completely false based on a 2-minute trailer and didn't watch the entire film. And I'm asking Matt Walsh, hey, right now I'll make a deal with you. You watch mine, I'll watch yours. And then you tell me if you aren't a little more convinced once you see all the information.
Are you already plotting and planning your next film?
Yeah. I mean, I would love, really what we're pushing for is to get as many people to see this movie as possible. Because since we're not on a streamer, like we're trying to encourage people to rent the film. Because on October 8th, you can rent it on all the main platforms. You can rent it on Amazon, or, you can rent it on Apple or Fandango, Roku, whatever you have. We're really like putting a lot of effort in this movie to see this movie. I mean, I've got some other like very social activist type movies I want to make, but it's also hard because again, like I was saying, like the industry is so scared to and God love them. Like I've worked with a lot of great directors as an editor, Morgan Neville, but his new documentary is a Lego movie about Pharrell, that's what's getting funded. Or Ron Howard just did a movie on Henson. Like, of course, everyone wants to see a movie on Henson or on Steve Martin. Those are fun. But that's what's getting funded, and it's that more family friendly, like big name thing, and anything that's like gritty. And that's why Participant, if we want to get into the business news here a little bit, Participant closing down.
I know
that is a tragedy.
No, it's a huge.
Who's going to fill the void? What billionaire? Please, billionaires. Attention, all billionaires, please help us make this kind of content.
Many billionaires listen to this show, so I'm glad. I'm so glad you stopped by, because this is the one. But no, I think I also talk about it. That's why people have Patreons. That's why you're starting to see more paywalls with people's Substacks and things like that. We're all gonna have to support each other at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, just
Yep.
like how 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I would run to Amoeba on Haight Street every Tuesday and buy a new record no matter what, because I was so deeply invested in.
I was just there a few months ago. The Amoeba is still there right at the end.
But the McDonald's is not. But the McDonald's is not, right? I think the McDonald's is gone. And also,
I think it's gone. But that was the opening to
the park.
The park where all the gutter punks were, right? That's where all the gutter punks were, kind of right there when you'd walk in to the park. And
Shaun, we can really talk about that. Now we're going to get into my whole childhood where I would go smoke weed. Well, no, it's fine. I would take, you know what I mean? Like, that was my whole
I know, that was your whole
life.
World.
There across the street, it was Milk Bar. I used to have my fake ID and go and listen to rap music with Andre Nicotina and Too Short. That's how long I've known Too Short. I used to go in 15 years old and go to the nightclub. Shaun.
Amazing. And now
that was my whole life. And now there's a fucking Whole Foods there.
I know.
And I mean, that McDonald's, let me tell you, there's so many stories there. But I spent
a lot of time on Haight. It's the best.
It's
still got some cool stuff. It's still got some cool stuff along there. It's not quite like what happened like with Soho in New York. It's not like there's a Gap along there. There's still a lot of tie-dye shops and but it's not quite the same.
It's not the same.
I liked that it felt dangerous. I liked it. I thought at any moment if a gutter punk might knife me, that's why I kind of liked being down there.
My God, I bought, I'll never forget it. We went, a friend of mine, to buy like an eighth, and we had like no money, and our like normal weed dealer wasn't calling us back. Also, this is an alleged story of lore. And this fucking awful gutter punk sold us just like fake weed, and we started to smoke it. And I'm like, why does this taste like incense? And it was total like fucking garbage tea leaves. And we're in 8th grade. Oh yeah, Shaun, we could really
and to all the children out there, back in the day, fake drugs just meant they didn't work. Today, fake drugs means fentanyl.
You'll die. So don't do that.
Say no to street drugs.
Shaun, I can't explain to you how lovely this experience has been. I knew watching the film that you were smart and brave, but little did I know how charismatic and wonderful you would be in person.
Oh, Liz.
Not always the filmmakers are. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
yeah, that's true. They can be a little grumpy. Yeah. I mean, I'm a theater major, and and I was in debate club. So it's been really fun for me to now, like, I want to debate more right-wing people. Like, I wanted to get into the weeds because they have the same tired talking points that are exhausting, the same talking points they had to try to, ban gay marriage, the institution of marriage between a man and a woman, all these ridiculous things. And I was in Glendale at the Glendale Emily a couple nights ago. We had a screening and I was there with the audience, and I said to them,
wait, you did?
Yeah, on Wednesday. Fuck. It was at the theater there. One night screening. It was kind of like a quickie.
I mean, here's the thing. I had jet lag. I was asleep by like 8 a.m. But maybe I could have rallied. But yeah, we never have anything in Glendale. And actually, I'm really happy that you did do it in Glendale. Yeah. Because we obviously have this like weird, like sleeper Trump, like conservative supportive.
You saw the footage, right? The most violent footage in the whole documentary at the end was the big fight in Glendale, California.
I know.
Like it's crazy. But
here's the thing. My neighbor is fucking Mark Maron, and my other neighbor is Lake Bell. Like,
right. You're surrounded by liberals. Right. But
yes,
but then who knows what, like down the street. I know that's what's crazy about LA. But I will say this, what I was saying to that audience was like, they were all like, I can't believe these binaries were just created. I'm like, right. So here's the thing. They made all that stuff up in 1870. It's all made up. So we can make up our own stuff. And we could just make up whatever we want. And that's what's so great about being pan or being, sapo or whatever. All these different words are coming up with that they're making.
Wait.
Did I say that wrong?
No, I just don't even know what is that?
Isn't that like that you really are into people that are super smart and you're into their intellect and it doesn't matter what they look like? I might be off here. Like, honestly, please fact check me in the comments.
I am not fact check. Well, please, yeah, I'm sure they will. But I mean,
there it is. There it is. We're just getting
close.
Close. Sapo.
Sapo sexual. Is it right though?
Yeah, I shortened it with sapo.
Okay, whatever. Sapiosexual. Okay.
Oh yeah, you're married. You weren't on Raya. You weren't on Hinge. Like, you see all these terms all over the
No, but you know what
apps.
I really did do quite well back in the day was OkCupid. Hey.
Yeah, that's pre 30 different identities. Now all these identities all over. But my point is that whenever anybody poo-poos those things, it's absurd because homosexual and heterosexual were invented very recently. We can make up whatever we want because everything's made up.
Well, because I'm technically omnisexual. You know what that is?
Give it.
Okay. So I like everyone, but I prefer romantic relationships with one gender.
Ooh, that might be like, I would say I find myself more in the pan category, but omni is good because that implies that you're more monogamous.
Yes,
that you're not.
That's why. Yeah, because I'm not pan. Because honestly, been there, done that. That was a whole bag of fucking tricks. I couldn't keep up. I'm like, I have work to do, and this is a lot of managing relationships and schedules.
Oh yeah, no, I could. But pan means that you like
poly is
polyamorous. Yeah, polyamorous, or now the new term, which is consciously non-monogamous, which means that implies that polyamorous is a little too like sex party-ish, and consciously non-monogamous means that you work it out with your partner. You're very open about it, and there's no funny business. So that's kind of a new term. Yeah.
I would have thought it was the opposite.
I think poly got a bad name, got a bad rap. But all I can say is that Lincoln was clearly pan, omnisexual because he did stay with I think one person at a time, but the whole point of the film is that there weren't those words back then. These words were made up. And I was saying to this audience, we can make up whatever we want. And these hundreds of laws that are going on the books are meaningless. It's like you cannot let these ideas be facts. These are all made up. Binaries are invented. And we can invent a whole new world. And we are. And that's what's important to remember. Is that, these things are just invented. These are social constructions. Gender is a social construction. There are hundreds of societies across the globe that do not even have gender terms like we do in their native languages.
No, I know.
These are
that's the
all
thing,
completely invented. So it's time for us to make up something new, which is fluidity, which is whatever I want to be. The one true constant is love, and pleasure and impulses. And those are the things I think people need to lean in on.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end. Shaun, you are just a sweetie little baby angel. I can't wait to meet you in person.
I know, Liz.
It'll be so fun. Also, your dog in the background.
I know. Just snoozing. That's Rudy.
We love Rudy.
Rudy was on TMZ. It's funny.
Yes.
Harvey interviewed TMZ, and at the end, they're like, "We love your dog." I was like, "Oh, Rudy's famous."
Honestly,
but now he's getting famous again, Liz.
Thank you. So famous. We are a dog-friendly world around this joint.
Hey moms, looking for some lighthearted guidance on this crazy journey we call parenting?
Join me, Sabrina Kohlberg.
And me, Andy Mitchell, for Pop Culture Moms.
Where each week we talk about what we're watching.
And examine our favorite pop culture moms up close to try to pick up some parenting hacks along the way.
Come laugh, learn, and grow with us as we look for the best tips.
And maybe a few what not to do's from our favorite fictional moms.
From Good Morning America and ABC Audio.
Pop Culture Moms. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.